Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 350. We made it, of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our third book is called From Letters to Leaders, Leveraging Your Fraternity or Sorority Experience to Land Your Dream Job. So go and pick up that book on Amazon today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there's nothing like great food to bring college students together. Fun fact, I am a huge movie fan, and there are some movie franchises out there, such as the Rocky franchise or the Karate Kid franchises, that really stand out to me in my childhood. However, Top Gun and the second film, Top Gun Maverick, are my favorite movies ever. I probably have watched the original film at least 50 times, and the second is just as good for me. So today, as a tribute to my all-time favorite film franchise, we have a Top Gun fighter pilot with us on the podcast. He is a former Top Gun fighter pilot, retired Admiral Mike Manazir, distinguished U.S. Navy career, spanned 36 years and included multiple commands: VF-31 Tomcatters F-14D squadron, USS Sacramento, USS Nimitz, and Career Strike Group 8 in the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. He completed 15 overseas deployments and flew more than 3,750 fighter hours, with 1,240 arrested landings on multiple aircraft carriers. His 5 tours at the Pentagon culminated in his role as a Deputy Chief of Naval Operations Warfighting Systems. His new and best-selling book, it's called Learn How to Lead to Win, features 33 powerful stories and leadership lessons that are based on real-life events in the chaotic and risky business of operating off the decks of U.S. aircraft carriers. At its core, the book reflects Manazir's selfless passion for developing people. Welcome to the show, Admiral.
Hey, thanks, Mike. It's great to be here. I just want to know who that guy is that you talked about in the biography.
I tell you, I told you before, my resume is insignificant compared to yours.
No, the really fun thing is, and we'll go into your questions early because there's some great stories about the 2 Top Gun movies that I got for you. But I just want to remind your listeners, I went to the Naval Academy, which we used to call an uncollege. I don't have the same college experience as your listeners do, but I started where your listeners are. And I had a North Star in my head that I wanted to go fly for the Navy. And that's why I went to the Naval Academy in Annapolis. And I just wanted to get through school and go fly. And then I got to do that. And so as we enter into this dialogue, which I think is going to be so much fun, I want folks to, think about as they're working through things right now and listening to you and reading your books about what the value of this whole exercise is for 4 years or 5 years or 6 years, to get through this, some kind of an undergraduate to a postgraduate. What is it all leading to? I had a North Star in my head. And so I would encourage listeners to write down, hey, what's my North Star? Because you need something like that to keep you through the down times, right? And 4 years at Annapolis, is not that much fun, and I would not do it again. I am very glad that I went, but a lot of the trials and tribulations through the day-to-day, kind of things, you go, what am I doing here? And well, I'm doing here because I want to do that in the future.
I love it. Great advice for the college students who are listening right now. Figure out what your North Star is, and that'll guide you through those 4 years or 5 years or however long it takes. I love it. Now, we have to talk about the Top Gun movie franchise. Tell our audience, what does that movie franchise get right, and what does it get wrong?
Well, what's really, really cool. What's really cool is in the first movie, the first movie was filmed through 1985 and released in the middle of 1986. I was in Top Gun in the class when the first movie was being filmed. And now they did it down the flight line at Miramar. They didn't mess with the class because we're busy, right? But they re-rigged my squadron spaces. So I was in the VF-51 Screaming Eagles from 1984 to 1987. And that was down the hangar from where Top Gun is in Hangar 1. So down to Hangar 3, they had the hangar spaces and the offices all kind of set up for movie sets. In fact, Viper's office, when you go into his office, when he's yelling at Tom Cruise and Goose, right, Maverick and Goose,
Right.
there's a picture of a family on the desk in the first movie. That is my skipper's family. So Commander Craig Honor and his family are on the desk, and so you see all those things. And then the extras, anybody you see around the side of that first movie wearing those cool aviator shades, that are kind of cliche and stupid looking, right? They're all doing that. Those are all actual pilots from Miramar that were in as extras. And you could listen to the filming, Kelly McGillis swearing up a storm when she got the lines wrong, when, down where her and Tom Cruise are talking in what usually is our administrative offices and stuff. So it was kind of cool to watch. Now, in the first movie, the Tomcat, the F-14 is flown with two people, and it has to be two people. And so when you see the actors flying in a Tomcat, they aren't actually flying. So down by the flight line, down actually close to where we were, they had a Tomcat set up with a canopy or the seats there, and those big photographic umbrellas around the canopy. And so they put cameras in there, and when they were flying, they'd bounce the cameras around like this to make it look like they're flying, and they'd kind of go back and forth, and the mask would move, and they'd go, hey, do some of that pilot shit, Mav, and all those kind of lines would come out. Well, all of that was kind of 1980s filming. And then a couple of our airplanes in 51 were all the camera technology back then was definitely not as good as it is now. And so there are all kinds of cameras all over a couple of Tomcats, and they would go out and film specific scenes. And a lot of the scenes would come from the Tomcat, and a lot would come from this Learjet that had a state-of-the-art 360-degree camera that they could train on the airplane. So a lot of the flying was being done with the Learjet. And in fact, when Cougar's coming aboard at the very beginning and he's waving around, didn't know if he can land it or not, that's actually a Learjet with a camera on it and coming down. And I'll tell you what, that civilian pilot has, big cojones. And he came all the way down in this Learjet, kind of on a carrier approach, and then waved off. It was kind of exciting out there to go do that. But the actors did not actually fly in the Tomcat in the movie. They got to fly in the Tomcat if they chose to in the back seat. Everybody did, with the exception of Val Kilmer. It was not in Val Kilmer's contract to go flying in a Tomcat, and so he waved off. He did not go flying. Everybody else did. They had a ball, got sick, of course. And so the only other thing that's kind of not true about Top Gun 1 was there's no trophy. So Top Gun itself, if you read, the lineage of it, it was designed to help improve the kill ratio in Vietnam. And so our Navy fighters, and in fact, Air Force fighters as well, were not doing so well. We had superior equipment, theoretically superior pilots, but not the case. North Vietnamese pilots in Russian aircraft were kicking our butts. And so we wanted to improve the exchange ratio, and the exchange ratio is how many red fighters are shot down for every blue fighter shot down, so every friendly fighter shot down. And so they came up with the school, which was designed to teach advanced fighter tactics to air crew in the F4 and the F8. And then the idea is you go back and you teach your squadron those techniques. And so quite seriously, it is very, very prestigious to be selected to go to Top Gun, but you don't want to come back all cocky and everything, like you're the best of the best. One, because it's just like a college locker room. It's a varsity athletics. It is really high competition, and anybody cocky is going to get knocked into the corner, just like you are in a locker room if you run around going, hey, I'm the best. And so you actually come back pretty humble, and you attempt to teach what they taught you in Top Gun. So the second movie, the actors did fly, and I think most people have seen documentaries, and what they did was the Boeing company makes two types of F-18 fighters. One is a single seat F-18E. It only has one seat in it. The other one is a two-seat F-18F. They actually are, so when I qualified to fly the Super Hornet, I flew the E and the F. They're identical to fly in the air. They just have a second person in the back, a weapon systems operator that operates the systems with a pilot. And when you put two of them in a very, very high stress environment with surface threats and air threats, those two people are better than 1+1. And so what they did in the movie is they made it look as if the actors were flying when they were in the back seat. So they would flip to the hands, the stunt pilots in the front moving their hands, and they'd show like Tom Cruise or the other actors on the team in the back seat looking like they're flying, and they actually are pulling G. And so when you see them back there going, they're actually pulling, and the cameras inside the cockpits are showing them, while they're doing that. What's really, really funny is a couple of the pilots, like Tom Cruise's pilot, the one who flew him and then was supposed to be him in the front, he's got a hairstyle like yours. So what they did, and we know that a lot of people out there are going to look, and they're going to look at the back of that helmet with Maverick on it. They go, that's not Maverick. And so they made this little pelt that glued to his neck. And so you see the thing sticking below the helmet, right? And they same with the hairstyle for the I forget her call sign, but the female pilot that flew with Bob in the back seat of this thing. And that was supposed to be an F-18F, but both actors are in the back seat and they're making it look like they're flying together. So the producers did a really, really nice job. The other accurate stuff, and so Top Gun, when they said, hey, we've picked the best of the best, we got all Top Gun graduates to come in and fly this secret mission they're going to go do. That's actually sort of true. Whenever we go out and test really high-end tactics, we value the opinions of what we call patch wearers. So the Top Gun patch on the flight suit, or the Air Force fighter weapons patch on their flight suit, signifies somebody who's been through the Top Gun syllabus. And they're very, very, very highly respected. And so having everybody walk in and go, we want to do this mission, we want to get the best aviators out there, and so we get a bunch of Top Gun graduates to come in, that's pretty close to the truth. And they didn't do the who's better, and of course for the movie purposes, having all the competition so that just added drama to it, which I thought was pretty cool. The canyon flying, that's a real low level. That is a real low level. It's up in the Cascades near Whidbey Island, Washington, up northeast, northeast of Seattle. And you can fly that. And typically the weather's too bad to get up there, but when the weather's gorgeous, it's just like that. And so getting down in there and romping around, the only thing wrong about that, there's no bridge. That one where they went like through the bridge, that's right. A CGI, computer graphics interface, sort of a bridge. And then the last thing I'll tell everybody is the jet that Tom Cruise goes out to do Mach 10 in and then ejects at the very beginning, that's not a real airplane. That was CGI'd around an F-18 flown by a guy call sign Weiser, who had 2 tours in the Blue Angels and was Tom Cruise's pilot. And they did a bunch of these low takeoffs to show the like that dust blowing up around Ed, whatever his name is, the Admiral, standing out there with his arms folded. Well, that scene and then they put the black airplane around it. The scene where the building roof lifts off, that actually happened. And the only thing, and that happened because the Super Hornet took the building off. The only reason that roof did not come up and flip over and kill the actor is because the electrical conduit actually held the roof on, and then it came back down.
Wow.
And so, the outtakes are really hilarious because the crew is out there going, you gotta get a little lower, and they lower and lower and lower, and then he blows the crap out of the folks there. Let's see. And then being a Tomcat guy, I saw the premiere of Top Gun Maverick in an IMAX theater during an annual meeting of all the retired and active duty aviation admirals. And so there's 60, guys and their, guys and ladies and their spouses packed in this IMAX theater watching this movie, giving each other unadulterated grief. And there is a rivalry between Tomcat guy, they call it the big fighter. So there's a big fighter, and then all the guys that grew up in F-18s, which are Hornets. And we call that the little fighter. So there's a big fighter guy and there's a little fighter. Anyway, near the end of the movie, and I hope I'm not a spoiler for anybody who hadn't seen it, but when they bring out that Tomcat, oh my gosh, I went nuts. I went, oh my God. It's pointing and yelling at everybody, the big fighter. And, oh my God, I want to hear the big fighter. So we're all yelling and screaming. Of course, the Tomcat comes out and Rooster in the back seat, hey, it doesn't work. And all the Hornet guys go, typical. They're all yelling. And of course it doesn't work. And then there's, you know, the things that he's doing in the cockpit. Hey, circuit breaker, press the circuit breaker in. When he put the steps up and the ladder up, the hardest thing to do in a Tomcat is actually put the ladder up, where he folds it and puts it up and then hops up onto the tail. That's really hard. Yeah. And you have to teach people how to make this thing work. It's like double jointed handed thing, you know, and everything. So he goes boom, 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 boom. And I'm going, that never happened.
You didn't do that on one take.
Oh my gosh. It was so funny. And then of course he goes out there and a couple things that people would ask me, hey, what airplane, like, okay, you can walk out to a Tomcat or walk out to a Super Hornet, you know, which do you like better? And I said, I like the Tomcat better. It's like having a 1967 Corvette. You know, it's sexy, it's loud, it's fast, it can't turn worth anything. And you get yourself in trouble with the thing. It's like power nothing, right? Super Hornet's like a 2023 Porsche 911. Right. Digital, drive-by-wire. You can do things in a Super Hornet that I would never do in a Tomcat. In fact, when I learned how to fly the Super Hornet, he said, hey, you put in these controls, I was a captain at the time, cross control the airplane, shove in that type of rudder, take the stick and put it all the way forward on the opposite side. In a Tomcat, instant spin. Right. And the guy, I'm saying, I'm not doing that. And he goes, no, sir, that's the software knows, oh, you want to do a pirouette, and it just flips around. And it was eye-watering. So the digital stuff we can do with airplanes now, they're building airplanes that should not be able to fly. And the software and the technology that goes into them and the processing that goes into them, they're actually flying computers, and they're just phenomenal. So anyway, yeah, the movies were totally fun. And yeah, it's just really cool. So,
yeah, that makes me feel really good that you enjoyed it and you saw the accuracy in the films for the most part. That makes me feel better. It feels more authentic to me as a fan of the franchise for you to say that you enjoyed it and it was realistic. That's all we want. Like, give us the real thing. Don't try to make up something that's just not true. Yeah. And so that makes me really happy. That's,
you know, my favorite part of the first movie was always that 1 minute or so, minute and a half clip at the very, very beginning where they're showing flight deck ops.
Oh yeah.
And they slowed it down. And that I spent a lot of time on the flight deck. I love that place. That's my happy place. Being in a fighter on a flight deck at sea is just great. And that sequence, watching all the guys run around and the signals and stuff, that's just really cool.
That is really cool. I enjoy that as well. So we all know the call sign Maverick, right? We all have seen that on the back of the helmet and the whole thing. How did you get the call sign Nasty?
So it's actually in my book. You know, I got a stack of Learn How to Lead to Win right behind me there. And call signs, let me tell your listeners, call signs are necessary in fighter aviation and then in operators like SEALs and guys like that. Because when you talk on the radio, like right now, if somebody calls out you and me on the same, and they go, hey, Mike, the two of us don't know who they're talking to, right?
Right.
And so if we go, you know, my call sign's Nasty, and they go, hey, Nasty, they know they're talking to me. And if they say, hey, Mike, they're talking to you. And so the calm brevity and the specificity of having that name on the net is why they happen. You can get them for various reasons. And, you know, sometimes it's usually when you do something like, you know, kind of a famous one is, you know, how, whatever, if you're on the catapult on the carrier and you pull the parking brake because your legs are tired of holding the toe brakes down, you know, because there's a little while till you catapult off. And then all of a sudden, time to get ready and leave the parking brake on. The catapult's going to fire. That thing's not going to stop. And both tires will blow because they're skidding. And the call sign's boom, boom. You know, so you get boom, boom, you know. And then there was a guy that flew in my back seat a long time ago. And his last name was Sill. So his call sign's window. And anybody with the last name of Berg, B-E-R-G, is automatically ice. So there's a whole bunch of ices, you know. And so you don't want to have like two ices in the same flight. Correct. So anyway, my name is actually pronounced Manazir. And so it's kind of that sort of a thing. Well, this joke-filled instructor, smartass instructor in advanced training, thought that my name sounded like Menage a Trois. And so we had to just take what the instructors did. You couldn't argue. And it was like, okay. And so you get a little name tag made, Menage a Trois, and they put up on the board. They would abbreviate it to Trois, you know. It's like, okay, whatever. And so we went to the officers club, and Kelly, my wife, was with me. We were married at the time, very junior in advanced training, and we're standing in this circle in the officers club at Naval Air Station, Kingsville, Texas. And a woman comes up and she's enamored with call signs. And so she's going around the circle with these guys, and she's saying call signs. And one of my classmates, a Marine buddy named Mike Matheny, his call sign's Martini for Matheny, Martini, close to his name.
Right.
Goes on Martini, and I'm standing right next to him. And she gets to my name and she goes, Manaj, oh, that's nasty. And so Martini goes, that's it, nasty. And so the next Monday, it was a Friday night. The next Monday, I got a new name tag. It said nasty, and we put it on the board, and the instructors went, okay. Sounds kind of funny. We'll let it. And I never earned anything since then. And that was in, oh my gosh, spring of 1983. And in 30 some years of flying and screwing up, I never earned anything different. Nobody else had the call sign when I showed up at Miramar. And so that's how I got it. It's a really dumb story. When I tell people it's nasty, they instantly think something bad. Instantly. Right. It's like, oh my gosh, what did you do? And I tell them it's opposite. I'm actually really nice. It's nasty, nice, so yeah. It's funny.
You also talk about in the book, you talk about your dad, and you mentioned that he didn't really give out praise very often. So when did he tell you that he was proud of you? At what point?
Yeah, it's funny. For your listeners, so my dad was a United States Marine, graduated from the Naval Academy in 1958. Pretty tough Marine. And the thing, we all should think about what emotional drivers we have that are driving us. And it took me a long time to figure out that my mother, who was very, very, very supportive, like I was, somewhere up here for her, and everything I did was great. I was number one son, and everything I did was great. So she motivated me with praise. And my father was almost pretty much never, hey, you're not good enough, or you're screwing up, or something like that. And so, all right, I'm going to prove him wrong. So that gave me that second sort of motivation to go and do this. And I was kind of a driven guy anyway. And so it gave me this interesting sort of a combination of humility and ego. And if I just had mom who was pushing, saying I was really cool all the time, maybe I'm a big fathead ego guy. And if I just had dad pump, down all the time on me, I can never be good enough. I might have a complex, an inferiority complex, right? So they kind of went both there. And dad was really funny. Even, I went to the Naval Academy. I listened to his stories when I was growing up, and then in the 8th grade, and I tell this in the book, it's the flash that got me to go to the Naval Academy. We went to a Georgia Tech Navy football game, and I saw the midshipmen march on just like Army Navy. I said, that's it. I want to be one of those guys. That's right there. That vision, white hat, black coats. I want to go do that. That's what got me to go to the guidance counselor and say, I'm going to the Naval Academy. What do I got to do? Well, dad never really, he wasn't like over the top glad that I'm going to his alma mater. He wasn't over the top glad that I'm going the same direction as he did. When I went there, he's like, I'd say something and he'd like just correct me just a little bit about what I was learning there. And I, learned a lot of stuff from him. And I knew he had gone there, but he didn't really talk about it. And in fact, I was going to be a Marine aviator because I think the U.S. Marines are just spectacular. I've got red and gold blood going through my veins. But there was an extra thing. The Marines were going to make me do an extra hurdle before I went aviation. And I said, nope, not doing that. And so I came back and I'm going to go Navy Air and fly Navy airplanes, Navy fighters off carriers. And dad never said a word. He didn't say you should go Marines. He didn't say you shouldn't go Navy. He didn't say a word about it. And I graduated and went Navy Air and got to be a Tomcat pilot. And I could tell he thought it was cool, but he never actually said he was proud of me or wrote that he was proud of me until I was in command of a ship. And way long time in my career now, I'm well past 20 years in the Navy, and he didn't verbalize it very often, but a couple of letters that I talk about, one in the book that was very powerful to me. Hey, I'm really proud of you. And I think he recognized how big this was that his son was in charge of. And so it took something that was like really big for him to say, just to say the words, I'm really proud of you. And I was, when I wrote the book, Mike, I really worked hard on not being negative on my dad. And because I knew he was going to read it. He's still alive. My mom passed away in January of 2015. I knew my dad was going to read it, and I sent him, I sent him a copy of it, and really kind of afraid of what he was going to think. And literally somewhere out of the blue, he texted me and goes, "Was I that bad?" And then he wrote me this long text about what he was trying to do, which was effective. I mean, Dad, you taught me how to lead. So the texts were going back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah.
And so I think he recognized that he did not, use the "I'm proud of you" enough. And I'll tell you what, it's really funny when people come up to me and talk to me about my book, they say, "Hey, you got my dad nailed as well. You didn't, he didn't tell me he was proud of me until very, very late in whatever it is." So something about dads and sons, maybe, the whole psychology thing about that, and not really saying I'm proud. And so that makes me, I think about that as a dad a lot. I have a 35-year-old son and a 39-year-old daughter, and I probably didn't do that enough when they were growing up. But even now when they're adults, I remember how powerful it was to me as a Navy captain that my dad said, "I'm proud of you." And so I try to do that with my kids as well, to actually say that.
Yeah.
But I definitely would tell the listeners, if you're out there doing college, doing hard things, your parents and the way they bring you up are driving you, and maybe you are yearning for that. "Hey, I'm proud of you," but I'm telling you that your parents are proud of you. I guarantee it. When you're out there trying and striving and doing stuff, even though they might not be able to verbalize it, I can tell you as the parent of adult children, they are proud of what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I'm sure there's a lot of college students out there right now listening, and they're saying, "Yeah, I mean, my dad never told me he was proud of me." And you obviously same thing. And I have an 18-year-old son, and I think about that story with your dad, and I'm like, man, I have to verbalize that, like, because that really drives us. And maybe the fact that your dad didn't say it, maybe that made you just continue to amp this up, and that's why your career is what it is. And it wasn't until later in life that you had the opportunity to have that conversation with your dad,
Yeah, I got to tell you, Mike, there's a nuance, even a lower, a kind of a theme underneath for me. And it drives the way that I lead. And it's typical an imposter syndrome. I'm like, what are you doing here? Why are you even here? Kind of thing. And I have a little bit of an inferiority complex sometimes, like, you're not good enough. And so even when I was captain of Nimitz, I'm the captain. I remember talking to somebody one time. It was a career sort of a mentorship thing. And he pulled out of me that didn't feel like I was good enough to be the captain.
That's right.
And that pressure from my dad, and then me trying to succeed, but never knowing whether I met the standard, even though I met the Navy standard on the captain, that drove what you're talking about. And what it formed was what I think is the most powerful feature for a good leader, and that's humility. I might, you're going to find out in 5 minutes I'm a fighter pilot, because all fighter pilots are just going to tell you what they fly.
Right.
But I'm going to tell stories, and I'm going to talk about what it's like. And I don't want somebody to be afraid to talk to me because I'm a captain or an admiral or a vice president or somebody that people are afraid to talk to because they're at a position, right? So what helped me a lot is I really wanted to connect with people in my command a lot. Like, I'm same as you. I just happen to have had these opportunities. And so that humility brings out, the approachability in a leader. And if you're leading a team, you're leading a company, or you're in the military or a nonprofit or anything like that, you got to make sure that you're approachable, that the people who lead with you know they can come to you and say something to you, and you're not going to act all holier than thou and the title, well, I'm the boss, and so the way you also give orders, or the way you describe where we need to go, you're not saying we're going to do that because I'm the boss. And if you lead from the heart with a human connection, you're gonna get people that start to trust you, and you're gonna trust them. You're gonna get to the point where you don't want to disappoint them, and they don't want to disappoint you. And that's really where you're going to start to get high performance. A lot of your listeners now are in college athletics, collegiate sports. The level of trust and the shared gratitude for the ability. I mean, you get on a winning team and you're just fired up because the morale's high because you're winning and everybody's good and they do their parts and they're committed to the team, and they get better and better so they can be better for the team. And then you get that trust in there, and that forms this very, very close bond that can apply in life everywhere. And if you've got some emotional drivers that allow you to be humble, then you're already ahead. If you have to think about being humble, work hard at being humble. Get somebody that can tell you, hey, you're doing that thing again, where you're like all holier than thou. You get a mentor to go and blow that head down and say, hey, listen, you're not all of that. And you just keep, telling yourself. Now, most people have a lack of confidence. And so, you look in the mirror and go, hey, I'm good. And I'm, there's little mantras, but there are also some people that think they are really cool and that they are the best at everything, and you can't tell them a thing, and they're probably not going to be effective leaders. The person who is working from a humble state is, in my experience, is a better leader.
Very good. Now you have this new and best-selling book. It's called Learn How to Win. And you talk about these real life events that have happened in a very chaotic and risky business of operating off the decks of US aircraft carriers. And our college students that are listening right now, I'm telling you right now, they are terrified to fail. They are scared to fail, even in college. So how do you survive when you plant a $75 million jet into the Pacific Ocean?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I got, that's the cover's got an aircraft carrier on it, and maybe you guys can see that, lead to win stuff back there. I'd grab them, but the earphones would rip out of my ears. So maybe you can show an image later on. So there are three themes in that book, and then we'll cover the ejection thing. There are three themes. So 33 stories they're great stories. They're the ones that I would tell, at the bar or in front of people, or, hey, Nasty, tell me about when you ejected out of a Tomcat. Oh man, that's a great story. All the stories in there are fun to read, and they just are. And then each one, though, when I was growing up, I learned something from it, a leadership lesson or a followership lesson. And sometimes I learned in retrospect what I actually learned, right? So the first in these stories, we attach a leadership lesson to them. So each one of those lessons in there, that's my experience. It's not some of the leadership authors out there that are telling about anecdotes and they're telling about, how to lead based on observation of somebody else. This is me, my 36-year life in the Navy, from actually starting in high school, entering the Naval Academy until retiring, 36 years later as a 2-star admiral. And so the stories are real, and they're what I learned in there as you do that. And so the three themes in that book, we already talked about one of them, is having a North Star. It's having a vision for what you want to go do. The second theme in the book is not being afraid to fail. Now, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to go fail today, because it hurts. And if your listeners read the book, there are several stories in there that I failed and I thought I was done. I wasn't going to be able to be a fighter pilot. I failed to carrier qualify in the TA-4J Skyhawk my first time in advanced jet training. I thought I was done. I thought I was never going to get my wings of gold. I thought I was never going to get to go fly Navy fighters. I thought I was done because I didn't know they let you go again. I thought it was a zero defect kind of a thing. Well, it turns out I got to go again, and I did better the second time. I got to go. And then way later on, about 20 years after that, a little more than that, but 26 years after that, I failed all of the selection boards to get an aircraft carrier after being trained to go nuclear power until the very last one. And the next to last one, my boss was the president of that selection board, and I didn't select. And that was the main look. And I was devastated. I was so angry, and I had failed. And then 1 year later, I got Nimitz, and it was an epic job. Best job in the galaxy is being a CEO of an operational U.S. Navy nuclear-powered carrier. Worth everything that goes into it. And so it brings me to my third theme. Because I had been willing to try as hard as I could to get to that North Star, I did everything possible, including tripping over myself and falling down and failing. The third theme is the resilience to get back up. You get back up and keep going towards that goal, and I guarantee you it's going to work. I 100% guarantee that if you keep that thing in front of you, you're going to achieve it if you just keep trying. Great book by Nathan Hill called Think and Grow Rich. And it talks about setting a plan, putting the plan in process, and keep going after it and getting up after the failure every time to achieve it. And that's what happened. So when I turned back around, so when you read my bio, hey, look at this guy, Mike, right? He went to the Naval Academy. He flew fighters. He went to Top Gun. He's an admiral. He commanded Nimitz. You go, wow, look at that guy. Are you kidding? The path to get there was awful. I mean, bang, 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 failing. I jumped out of an airplane. I mean, and so in the middle of my career, the one thing that you never want to have happen to you flying an airplane is to eject out of it.
Right.
Unless it's like somebody shoots at it and blowing up. But no, I did this all myself. Went out and did the maneuver that's described in the book, and I won't spoil it for the readers, but the only thing I did right that day was pull the ejection handle. And we did that. And oftentimes, when you're sitting in a cockpit, two things are working on you. If you get in a high stress situation like that, the first one is you're trying as hard as you can to recover the airplane or keep it from hitting the ground or hitting the water, or another airplane. And then the second thing is sort of a fear of getting out of this very comfortable environment, right? I'm about to pull the ejection handle, complete uncertainty, unknown, and I've never done this before because you don't typically, and like, it's going to hurt. And we used to call it, when it comes time, don't hesitate. These are the rules when you eject. And actually, my situation, I let the jet go 2,000 feet below the mandatory eject altitude because I wasn't done yet. But I was thinking, like, I've still got something else to do here. And then I had this vast realization in the front of my face, like, hey, you idiot, get out of the jet. Because we used to tell people is, don't ride the airplane into the dirt or into the water trying to recover it. You get out when it says to get out. And we used to call it, give the jet back to the taxpayer. That's what we used to call it. So the Tomcat I was flying in August of 1987 is a $75 million aircraft. So I gave $75 million back to the taxpayer, and actually I joke to people that I've been paying it off ever since, every 2 weeks, kind of thing. So, total failure. I mean, now, oh my God, look, and because of what I did, now both engines were stalled, and I don't know that I ever would have gotten at least one of the engines started to be able to recover the airplane. But in my haste to get the airplane's nose into the air to be able to start the engines, I put in what we call pro spin controls. So in effect, I kept the airplane out of control because I put controls in too early. And so the violent departure it was doing, I kind of kept it in there too long, and we had to jump out. And so pilot error. And so, here you are the varsity athlete, and these safety reports and these boards that are done, there's a report to the community. And so there you are on full display as an idiot, and we're all, well, it's his fault. And so I did get to fly about 5 weeks later when the boards were all done. I was given a thumbs up to go flying again, but I spent the next year trying to prove I was still that Top Gun graduate fighter pilot, because I was actually an instructor in the training squadron. I was a Top Gun graduate. I was actually the squadron expert on high angle of attack maneuvering. So theoretically, the expert shouldn't have jumped out of the airplane. I should have been showing the textbook case of recovery from the airplane. And so I had to get myself back up on the horse and demonstrate that I am that Top Gun graduate instructor fighter pilot. And you just got to get up and go, all right, yep. And a lot of the therapy that I did was I would teach the students about ejecting, what it feels like, why I did what I did. So I'm pretty vulnerable when it comes to telling what I did. It's kind of the humility thing, and like, I don't really belong here, so I'm going to tell you how I got here, kind of thing. So I spent a lot of time describing, and that helped me to work through sort of that whole thing. But it took me about a year to kind of recover my my flying self-esteem sort of thing, and I for a while I would, instead of flying the airplane all the way to the very, very, very edge of the envelope all the time, which we train to do, I was kind of in the middle of the envelope for a lot of the time, and not kind of going over there because I knew what was going to happen when I went over there. And every time we did one of those vertical recoveries or stuff, I was waiting for the engines to stall as badly as they did. And I never had it happen to me again. So it was kind of a confluence of factors.
Wow, what a lesson in resilience. And man, oh man, so the college students listening, you just got an amazing $1 million class on resilience right there to get back on that horse that the Admiral was able to get back on.
Hey, let me tell you a specific story. You said get back on a horse. So 5
Yeah.
weeks after I jumped out, I got to go flying again.
Yep.
Jump in the back seat. This guy jumps in the back seat. We go taxiing to Miramar. We go out and we go east now over the desert. I did one maneuver, the vertical maneuver we ejected out of, and said, okay, lock your harness, up we go, put the thing in military power. And this time I folded my arms, I put my feet down on the deck. I didn't touch a thing. And the airplane did what it normally does. I'm praying, please, please, please. The engine stayed lit the whole time. The airplane comes out. I recovered the jet. We flew back to Miramar. That's the only maneuver I did. Get that hot rock out of my gut. So that hopping on back of that iron horse, that's what I did the very first chance I got.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And how do you land a crippled jet with the navigator hanging out of the blown canopy? His parachute is wrapped around the tail of the plane.
Yeah. Yeah, that was so I was the landing signal officer for that. That's another story in the book, and it comes under the heading of guidance. Another guy flying the airplane, I would call that a black swan. I don't think in the history of naval aviation has one of the crew members been ejected halfway out of the airplane. And again, I won't spoil the story, but the way he got there was interesting. It was a malfunction of the ejection seat when they were maneuvering. And now, the ship's in this huge turn. I get called up to the LSO platform, kind of jog back there. And the senior enlisted guy on the flight deck is called the air bosun. And he stops me at the forwire, puts his hand on my shoulder. I was the senior landing signal officer on the ship. So I was responsible for landing airplanes, all weather, all conditions, all, any kind of emergency they had. And I could tell what to do with the ship and the winds and, all those kind of things with some technical backup from the manuals. But it was my job to use judgment, right? And so he says, we got a partial ejection in an A6. And I think that means, okay, that means the right seater's gone. The pilot's still flying the airplane. The canopy's gone. So he's probably going to be hard of hearing. Canopy's all smashed up. I got to worry about whether you can hear or not. And then the air bosun talks into his microphone, lifts it back up, and yells into my ear, the BN, Bombardier Navigator, is still with the airplane. His feet are in the cockpit. I'm like, what?
What?
And I'm picturing like he's outside, he's banging alongside of the airplane, like only his feet are in there, like he's hooked or something. Like, what are you talking about? So I go sprinting over to the LSO platform, and I'm the only one up there because of the way this whole thing came about. Ship's in a huge turn. And what I had to do was manage flying the airplane and the ship's maneuvers to get the wind right. Because anytime you land an airplane on an aircraft carrier, you have to have a component of headwind. And it minimizes, or I should say it optimizes the momentum for when we hit the arresting wire with the arresting hook, right? So there's a minimum amount of headwind that the A6 Intruder and every other airplane that lands on a carrier had to land in. Well, the carrier is turning into the wind. But Mark, the pilot, is flying the airplane over to intercept the carrier. And so we wanted to get him on board so we could tend to Keith Gallagher, who stuck out the top. But we had to get the winds to the point where he could land. And so what I ended up doing, and this is where the whole guidance thing comes in, I knew what I wanted to do. And so if you Google A6 partial ejection, there's a great website that's done, or Keith Gallagher put it up, and there's a little radio sequence that has my voice talking to the airplane on the way down. And I'm talking to Mark what to do with the airplane. I'm talking to the captain about what to do with the ship. And typically the lieutenant commander or landing signal officer doesn't tell the captain what to do with the ship. But I was looking at the signal flags on the island that were blowing, kind of, backwards and then straight out, waiting for them to get to the point where they were angled enough that I knew where the winds were coming from just by looking at the flags. And then I wanted to get the airplane landed. So I told the captain 3 times, steady up the ship. I'll take the winds the way they are. Not going to be optimum, but I could look at the flags and go, I can keep him coming across the ramp. The downside is if Mark, the pilot, pulls too much power off and you've got too much crosswind, he will hit the ramp. the airplane will strike the metal part, not on the tires, and the airplane will explode, and we'll lose both guys and maybe some people on the flight deck. So we had to watch out for a ramp strike. But I took the wind and took the airplane, and I just started lip locking him all the way down, keeping him up, landing him on the one wire, just before the one wire aft of it, as if anybody's watched the Top Gun movies, you see what that looks like. Mm-hmm. And the airplane actually bounced. And it skipped the hook skipped the one wire, the two wire, and the three wire. And I'm yelling attitude about 6 or 7 times. And that means pull back on the stick. And so Mark did, and the hook dragged into the 4 wire and stopped. When the airplane went by me, and so you guys can't see me, but say I'm looking up to my left-hand side here from the LSO platform, the airplane goes across the ramp at about 25 feet above, the pilots are about 25 feet above the ramp when they come across and land. And the way Mark was stuck out, Keith was stuck out of the airplane, his face was laid over looking at me, and he was passed out. I thought he was dead. And so I see this dead human face, and I went, oh, it's total sinking feeling that we had not recovered him in time. And actually he'd been passed out by, 300-mile-an-hour air going, like in his face.
Right. And
he couldn't breathe in that air he couldn't exhale, he couldn't take a breath. So he passed out, and he was unconscious when the airplane went over, and I thought he was dead. Wow. And only found out, and I thought actually at the time, I thought I must have stopped talking because I just froze, like, oh my God, he's dead. But the radio thing is just me. I don't ever stop talking the whole time. So just an amazing thing. And
what a story.
Yeah. Oh,
the other interesting story, I know you love steering that nuclear aircraft carrier. You were in a horrific monsoon in the Indian Ocean while the flight deck is totally awash, flooded, to get to India just so the crew could go ashore and do community service of all things. What was going on there?
Yeah, so we were way up. It was July, late June 2007. We were way up in the North Arabian Sea and the Arabian Gulf. So conducting strikes against bad guys in Afghanistan and bad guys in Iraq. And we got tasked to go to India to support President Bush's civilian nuclear power program agreement with India. And he wanted an aircraft carrier to go in there and essentially show the flag, right? And so the 4-star called me up and said, hey, you're going to leave all the ships in there, just go through the Indian Ocean and go down to India. And I said, okay, boss. And then, we came out of the Strait of Hormuz in between Oman and Iran. You see it on the news all the time. Mm-hmm. The Iranian boats come out. And so we went through there, normal sort of tension. And then came out, and there's this, and in the summertime in the Indian Ocean, there's a thing called the southwest monsoon, and it's like typhoon monsoon kind of weather coming from the southwest up the Gulf, right? And so, because it's coming down from Africa and coming up the Indian Ocean, it has a long way to get these big waves going. And so there was a monsoon, a storm that was forecast as we were going across. And I said, hey, to the 4-star, and I had an admiral in between me, and I said, I talked to him, and then we got word back to the admiral staff that tasked us and said, hey, we got a storm in the way. And the 4-star came back and said, just take the risk, that you're comfortable with, but we need the carrier down there if you can make it. Like, okay. And so we go down the track, taking us down through the Indian Ocean, down towards the southern tip of India, was right straight through the red parts of the storm. And, it's just like on the Weather Channel when you see it. These big red blotches of, oh my God, right? And the waves were 60 feet high. And that's as high as the flight deck is. And so when you get the ship moving, now we're down, there's water all over the airplanes. Nobody's allowed outside. There's water everywhere. The ship's getting beat to hell. And so I start looking, I got pretty good when I was driving the carrier, looking to see where the waves were going and how big they were. And I noticed that the waves were kind of going to the east. To the east. And so what I wanted to do was actually turn the ship and go with the waves. And so I told the admiral that was on board, I said, I'm going to turn. He said, you're not allowed to, because our track that we're supposed to follow goes. I said, hey, boss, it takes us right through the middle of the storm. So I'm making a decision to go this way. And so what we ended up doing is turning, going the same direction as the waves. And then I continued to speed the ship up so we'd be at the same speed as the wave. And so that was 26 knots. So we're doing about 30 miles an hour same speed as these big ass swells that were going to the east, right? Mm-hmm. And so the one thing I talk about in the book is me and the bosun, the ship's bosun named Terry Norris. We were doing a tour of the ship to make sure nobody was outside and things weren't, coming apart on the ship. We walked out to the fantail, which was the very back end of the ship, and walked outside and walked up, and we looked up and saw this 130-foot high mountain of water about to break over the top. And we're like, oh my God, and a lot of other 4-letter words, and go screaming inside, thinking that this wave is going to bash down on the back of the ship. Well, it never did. And what we figured out was the carrier had gone over a crest and then down into a trough. And so now we're in the trough of a 60-foot wave at the very bottom. So now you got 130 feet of water, way above us. And then we just rode back up. Well, that worked until we got to the coast of India, where I was forced to turn south because of the shallowness of the water. And now we just got beaten on, by the side of the ship. I lost steel catwalk, came off the side. It crushed a steel pipe, this big incinerator pipe that was along the side. It crushed it flat. The waves did. Water's like hitting all the sponsons and coming inside the ship and stuff. And so it was a real challenge. We did get around the corner of India and got up to the port, and we were there, but the waves were kind of bad. Actually, we were too, and it was a big challenge getting there. But yeah, I have a great picture from one of the photographers took, and this big wave coming over the side of the carrier. We're still headed south, and it's got this big curving wave over the front where all the airplanes are. It's like, here comes the water, like that.
That's great.
Yeah, that's fun.
One of the other things I wanted to talk to you about, the college students that we're working with today, they're looking to each other for advice, okay, which is kind of a scary thing because you and I both remember being 18 years old. So why do you believe mentorship is so important?
Well, there's when you do look to each other for advice, you really do need to think about, the experience of the person that you're listening to or talking to. And I would say that the students who are looking for advice, make sure you're not looking for somebody to affirm what you think. You don't want a person to affirm, oh, sure, great idea, jump off that cliff, it's going to be fine. And the water's just fine. It's totally fine, go ahead. You don't want that kind of mentorship. You want somebody that's going to push back on you and say, okay, I hear what you're thinking. Let me propose this alternate point of view. I had in my career, so I've had in my career peer mentors. I had some people at the Naval Academy that I immensely respected. Same experience as me, completely different background, wonderful value to me to listen to them. But I also knew that they had kind of the same experience as me, so your mentors generally have more experience than you in the thing you're looking to be mentored for. So that's what you want to seek, is somebody who's kind of out here. So let's just say, for instance, somebody in one of your listeners is a ROTC person and they want to know about flight school. Well, shoot, I'm a great mentor for that, right? I can tell you about flight school. I can tell, because I was there. You kind of want to have somebody that was there. There's other mentors that are kind and gentle, and they kind of help you and they give you all this kind of thing. And then there's other mentors that just kick you in the ass through the door. And those kind of mentors, I talk about this in my book, the value of mentors, especially the ones that are, you don't want to do what they're telling you to do. But they know what you're capable of. They know your potential. And you're like, I don't want to go do that. I might fail. And they're going to push you and make you go do that. So even if you do fail, you have that experience of failure. And then that's why I used to share with people in my line of work, who, fighter pilots junior to me, up and coming commanding officers. I shared everything that I learned. And the reason that I wrote my book was to be able to share. I had so much failure in my career and the things I wanted to do. Let me tell you about how I got here. So don't be afraid, of this. And when somebody goes, hey, that guy got fired out of that job. And I go, because he did something that you know not to do, so I could give them sort of the boundaries. But mentors are so important. People that help you along the way, that can The other function of a mentor, I mentor a lot of people, is actually to be able to go to somebody and say, hey, young Samantha over there in the the Aero program, rock star, wants to be an astronaut. All we need to do is get her over this one hurdle. And you're talking right to the person that can get her over the hurdle. And you're advocating for that person. That's the other function of a mentor, is to be able to do that, is to have access to decision makers and highlight the achievements of the mentee. And so a peer mentor can be very effective if they are the ones who are pushing back on you. And if you choose somebody and you go, look, I'm trying to fix something, a habit I have or a thing I want to do, can you help me get to this place? So if you see me doing this thing, would you say something to me? Or if you see me faltering, would you push a little harder on me? And because they're in the same situation, that can be very, very effective.
Yeah.
And so I would only warn your listeners, don't seek a mentor to affirm your mindset or the way you're thinking. Those are not mentors, and that's not what you want. You want somebody giving you an alternate point of view from their perspective, and say either you don't think it's a good idea, and they go, no, it's a good idea. Here's why. Well, I might fail. It's okay. It's okay. I did the same thing. I failed too. Or I'm thinking about doing this, and they go, no, that's not a good idea. Here's what could happen. And they might have the ability to open your course of action list to something that you hadn't thought about. So you want to seek mentors out. And then the last thing I'll tell you, a mentor program is going to fail. Always going to fail. So if anybody's creating a program where they're identifying a mentor for a mentee, hey, Mike, I want you to call Sam up. He's senior you. He's going to be your mentor. Well, if I don't have a personal relationship with Sam, nor develop it relatively early, he's not going to be able to be a mentor. Mentor and mentee have a personal relationship. And it's a relationship that values vulnerability and sharing and transparency, but total non-attribution, so it stays close. Mm-hmm. And you have to have that personal relationship to get the most out of a mentor and a mentee. So I've had a lot of people, in my current job, kind of reach out and go, I'd like you to be my mentor. And I really try hard to make sure that they understand we have to have a personal relationship first, or at least develop one. I'm willing to have a conversation or two, but if we haven't formed a personal connection fairly early, it's not going to work.
Yeah. Great points. I love all of it. And thank you for sharing all of those stories. I failed 1,000 times. I know you failed as well. I've never planted a $75 million jet into the Pacific Ocean, but I have failed before. And so I think it's important for college students to hear that over and over again, that you can still be successful if you get back on that horse. But, are you going to be resilient enough to do that? That is the question to get back on. And you talked about your current job, and I know you're working for Boeing today. Tell our audience, what do you work on at Boeing right now?
So what's really cool, and I completely separate, this effort with the book from Boeing. But what's great, two things about Boeing. The first one is leading people is the same here as it was in the military. And so any of your listeners, well, I'm not a Navy guy, I'm not going to the military, so that's the Admiral doesn't have anything for me. Leading people is the same everywhere.
That's right.
It is, and it's leading from your heart. So that's first. Second, what I do for Boeing, I connect the U.S. Navy and Boeing. So it's a wonderful job. Anything Boeing, it's generally defense, but anything Boeing has that the Navy would be interested in, and then anything the Navy's interested in that Boeing might have. It could be something in Boeing Commercial where we build 737s and 777s out in Seattle. They might be wondering about how we put those airplanes together at such a fast rate. And so I might connect Navy leadership with the business leaders out in Seattle to do that. And so I've had that job now for 5.5 years, and it's a great job. It allows me to continue the work I was doing in the Navy just as a retired admiral now instead of an active duty admiral.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad your career is just, I'm in awe of all of the stuff that you've done. So you and I could talk for hours. We're going to have to do that in Nashville over a beer at some
You're
point.
on.
So I like that. Now we got to talk about food, because I love to eat really good food. And I think that a place that I can get a great meal in the Washington, D.C. area. So where should I go for my next great meal in D.C.?
Oh, dude, this is easy. In Foggy Bottom, a stone's throw from George Washington University, on Pennsylvania Avenue, is a place called Founding Farmers. Founding Farmers. It has epic drinks and this great menu all the way across the spectrum of whatever you would want to have. And it's always packed. So you got to get a reservation there. But Founding Farmers, right close to GWU. So if any of your listeners are in George Washington, are like, woo, you know, that's good. And then also right in there, you know, because you know, GW is there, there's a whole bunch of great food places that are just right in that same area. So you can, you know, you can Google map whatever and be surrounded by stuff. But my choice to take people and to go to when I'm down and I want to go someplace to eat. In fact, I just last week took somebody there to Founding Farmers is to go down there. Parking's easy. Got a parking garage right there. And of course, all your listeners probably Uber or something like that. But It's awesome.
All right, Founding Farmers.
Take your family there, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. That sounds like a plan. I'm definitely going to hit that the next time I'm in DC. So this is great. I mean, you offer so much in terms of your stories and leadership. I mean, just like you said, this is real stuff that you've been through. This is not an anecdote. This is like real life. And that's what I love about you. So if our college student listeners, if they want to bring you in to come and speak on their college campus, or they want to buy your book, where should they go in order to connect with you and then get the book?
So the connection is www.mikemanazir.com. So MikeManazir.com. And then that has a way to get the book. It has a whole bunch of leadership content on the website. We're just today launching a newsletter. We put out a newsletter, and the topic this week is communication. And we're starting to put together this idea about having a webinar down the road, where a subscription webinar where people get on and do that. But there's a bunch of content already on there. There's a whole bunch of pictures of me and my career and all kinds of stuff. So there's great content there. And the book is available on Amazon. The Kindle book is there. This month, we're having a promotion where every other day is 99 cents for the ebook. Ooh. And so look, the promotion's on social media. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And if you look at the promotion thing and hit it, you're going to get a 99-cent ebook. And then if you like it a lot and you want to make notes in the margins and stuff, on Amazon is paperback, hardcover. And then I also narrate an audio book, and it's on Kindle. So I narrated my own book. So you hear my voice telling the stories. And the idea of the thing is, when I tell the stories is me and your listeners, we're sitting across from each other with our favorite frosty beverage or a bourbon or a cigar or a lunch or the bar, or holding court in the frat house or something like that, you know. And that's the tone of the book, is you hear exactly how I experienced, you know, these things and what I learned out of them. And so that's where you go. So www.mikemanazir.com. And then Amazon has the books. If you just Amazon search Lead to Win or my name, you'll see the book. It has an aircraft carrier on the front. It's a blue. Like I said, I'd reach back and get one, but my earphones will rip out of my ears, so I won't. But maybe your listeners can find it.
This has been a lot of fun. The name of the book is called Learn How to Lead to Win. Admiral Manazir, let me tell you, you are one of a kind. It's an honor to spend time with you today. Thank you so much for sharing all this great information with our audience.
Hey, you're welcome, Mike. Thanks. I'm coming to Nashville because I want to go to your favorite food place and have whatever we want to drink with our food. I'm thinking bourbon selections and, you know, courses like steak and meat, you know, and that kind of thing, you know, standard fighter pilot stuff. I want to come down and do that.
We are going to do all of that and then some. There's probably going to be a tour of the Jack Daniel's distillery as well. But, you know, I digress. There's a lot to do here, and it'll be an entire all weekend event. All right. This has been great. And to our listening audience, if you enjoyed this conversation with Admiral Manazir, make sure that you like it. Make sure that you share it on social media with other college students. And we hope to see you on another episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.